If you're looking for a slow burn crime thriller where Cyclops accidentally murders a man and comes to the doorstep of Batman searching for aid, then boy do I have the movie for you. Today we're going to be reviewing Knox Goes Away, available now on Max. I'm Brennan Sem for the New Wave Nerds. Subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. Knox Goes Away, directed by Michael Keaton, follows a contract killer with a rapidly evolving form of dementia who is given an opportunity to redeem himself by saving the life of his estranged son. So non-spoiler reviews, I thought this movie was pretty fun. It's nothing to shout about, it's nothing amazing in my opinion, but definitely a fun watch. Like I said in the opening intro, it is a bit of a slow burn, so if that's not your style of movie, then maybe give this one a pass, but I found it highly enjoyable. I thought the story itself was really interesting. It's not something that I've necessarily seen before. A contract killer, a hitman with this dementia who's rapidly losing his train of thought, rapidly losing his short-term memory. It poses an interesting problem, and one that I wouldn't have thought of, one that I wouldn't have thought needed a story to be told, but it's actually done in a fairly interesting way. Again, it's nothing to shout about. The twist, I suppose, is one that you'll likely see coming a mile away. I've realized what was going to happen about 40 minutes into the film, but it was interesting to see the journey, to see this almost character study of this man, because the contract killer himself is really, really interesting, right? He's not your stereotypical thug. He's not your stereotypical goon. This is a thinking man. This is a man with a doctorate in English studies and I think history. This is a very intelligent man. This is a guy who's given the name Aristotle because when he was off overseas in the Gulf War, he would often read philosophy books. As interesting as that sort of character element is, I wish it had come through in the movie more. I wish we had felt a little bit more throughout that this was a philosophical gentleman, if you will. There are sort of interspersed quotes and interspersed overarching themes with the books and the like, and there's some interesting interplay between Knox and some other characters, but unfortunately I felt like that aspect of the character wasn't really shown as much, and so sort of that's why I say it's like half a character study. Unfortunately, we don't get to see as much of the inner workings of the mind of Knox as I would like. Unfortunately, we don't get to see much. There are interspersed scenes exploring other storylines and other subplots, which are interesting in their own right. But unfortunately, I think they detract from the character of Henry Knox. I think it's really actually I don't think his name's Henry. John Knox, excuse me. He says his middle name is Henry, and that's the beginning signs that his mind is starting to go away, and so that's sort of why I thought that. But I feel like if we had been given a few more scenes, a little bit longer to really understand this character, then this movie would have been much better. Likewise, I think if we had had a little bit more time, a few more scenes to sort of see the relationship between this contract killer and his son, his estranged adult son, I felt like that would have made the movie much more interesting as well. Obviously, that there's sort of those overtones throughout the interactions between the father and the son, but I wish we could have seen a little bit more. I wish maybe, perhaps not flashbacks of the childhood of the son, but perhaps maybe some exposition where we understand a little bit more of the relationship and why it's strained, or perhaps if we get some allusions to previous conversations that happened during this period where there's very little communication. I think that would have been really interesting, but unfortunately, it's a little bit thrown to the wayside. it's a little bit tossed aside. It's just sort of mentioned, oh, this is a son who does not have a good relationship with his father because of X, Y, and Z. And I wish it had been a little bit more fleshed out. I think it would have made for a much more interesting movie, and it would have made for a much more satisfying, I suppose, redemption arc for John Knox. It would have made, I mean, in the tagline here, it says he's offered the opportunity to redeem himself. And while he does in some ways get redeemed, the impact of that redemption as it relates to his son is lessened by the fact that we don't necessarily get to see too much of that relationship. But all in all, I think the story is really interesting. I think it's very fun. You know, the way that it goes about setting all of this up is really, really interesting. Now, this is the spoiler warning. We're going to start talking a little bit more about the actual story and some things that I liked and some things that I disliked. So this is your final warning. And 3, 2, 1, and we're good. Okay, so spoilers. I thought the idea of this estranged son coming to his father who has this rapidly evolving form of dementia, I thought it played very well as a story device, right? Because the actual story itself revolves around Knox going about this plan to resolve the issue, right? So the reason that the estranged son shows up on John Knox's door is because he has murdered the man who raped his daughter, right? And he's naturally freaking out. He has no idea what to do. And so he goes to the only man who has experience in this world, his father. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And I enjoyed the story device of why the son kills the I thought that it was really understandable, right? Because it's sort of, in a lot of cases, it's hard to sympathize or empathize. That was a hard word. It's hard to understand, when you see somebody kill another person. At least for me, somebody who, I get angry a lot, but never in my life have I ever thought, God, I'm going to murder this person, or never in my life. I've been blessed enough that never in my life have I been wronged to such a degree that murder ever crossed my mind. Never has anyone in my life been impacted in such a way that my only thought was, all right, I got to go beat this guy into a pulp. I've been very blessed in that way. And because of that, it's hard for me to empathize. But in this movie, I think it's done very well. It's a situation that you can understand why this average normie guy, this normal person, can go to these great lengths, can cross the Rubicon and do something that is evil, right? To do something that is objectively bad. You understand it, right? When you see and when you hear the events that transpire and how all this goes on, and you view it from a father's perspective, it's entirely understandable. And so I thought it was a very good story device. And then I really enjoyed the plot of John Knox's plan to resolve this, right? So the son comes to John Knox and he says, "Please help me," and Knox goes, "Yeah, okay." And then so Knox, knowing that he has this rapidly evolving form of dementia, knowing that he only has, a couple months of lucidity left, he goes about putting into play this plan that would essentially frame him for the murder of this other person, absolving his son. And he plays on the estranged relationship between the two of them to do it. And I thought it was very well done. Again, it's not exactly a twist. At least I didn't think it was a twist. I saw it coming fairly early on. But nonetheless, that didn't make the story really all that less enjoyable. I was curious to know, how is he going about this? How are all of these pieces going to fall into the puzzle? How is this going to look as a whole? how is he going to stage this crime scene? And I thought it was really well done. I thought the writing was really, really interesting. This movie is written by Gregory Poirier, who has very little work to his name, at least very little good work. One of the top films in his filmography is National Treasure Book of Secrets, right? Which I don't remember. I only saw it the once a very long time ago, but I remember not enjoying it. And to be honest, I only partially enjoyed the first National Treasure, so maybe this is one that is beloved by the fans and panned by the critics, and maybe I need to go give it a second watch, but not very high ratings. Gregory Poirier also wrote Rosewood, which is one that I'm not all too familiar with. However, it does have a very high rating on IMDb. Well, not very high, but moderately high. It has a 7.2, and then the Metacritic score is 70. So, moderately good. Moderately good. I enjoyed the writing here. I thought it was moderately well done. Some of the dialogue choices felt clunky. Some of the aspects didn't necessarily work the way that I think they were supposed to. And so, I'm going to sort of parrot what I said about the rest of the movie, is that it's good but not great, right? Which is, good is the least that you can ask for. I thought it was very enjoyable. Now, as I mentioned, this movie is actually directed by Michael Keaton, which I didn't realize until I started watching it, but I was pleasantly surprised by. I always think it's fun when actors or writers or whatever try to expand out and do other things, right? And I think sometimes actors make really good directors. I can't remember the guy's name. Ed Harris. Ed Harris is an actor, and he's a very accomplished director, right? We got Clint Eastwood, a very accomplished director. Mel Gibson, outside of whatever you think of him personally, of any of his whatever, outside of that, he's a fairly accomplished director. He knows how to make movies. Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto are fantastic. I think Apocalypto even won some awards for VFX or something along those lines. But in any case, this movie is directed by Michael Keaton. This is his second feature film after The Merry Gentleman, which I believe came out in 2009. Let's see here. Yes, 2008. Similarly scored on IMDb. IMDb rating in the 60s and the Metacritic score in the 50s. So not incredibly accomplished. I'm probably going to watch this. I'm probably going to watch The Merry Gentleman, or I'm going to try to watch it after watching Knox Goes Away. I'd be curious to see how I feel about Keaton's directorial style. Obviously, you can't tell too much from just the two movies, but it would be interesting to see. And so I think that's a positive coming out of Knox Goes Away as well, is I kind of want to see more of the work of the people attached to this. I kind of want to watch Rosewood. I kind of want to watch The Merry Gentleman. And I think that is a good sign. That bodes well for the movie as a whole. Now, Michael Keaton, obviously most known as an actor, right? He's only got the 2 directorial credits. Obviously, everybody knows Keaton. He's got movies galore. There's no time here to list all of the movies he's in. Just top of mind, we have Batman 89, Beetlejuice, we have the Beetlejuice sequel, Spider-Man Homecoming, Birdman, the list goes on. An incredibly talented actor, and I thought in this he did a really, really good job. I thought, he conveyed a lot about the character with very little dialogue. He's very accomplished at facial expressions and at body language, and I really enjoyed the interactions, I really enjoyed how Michael Keaton shows the rapidly evolving dementia. I thought it was really, really interesting. And so, Keaton is always great, and in this, he's probably the best aspect of the movie, of course. And I was really pleased with what I saw. I've seen some other reviews of people saying that they thought it was unimpressive and a little lackluster, nothing to necessarily shout about. And on that much, I will agree. Again, with it keeping in line with the rest of the movie, this is not an amazing performance from Keaton. This is not going to, he's not going to be nominated for anything off of this. This isn't going to win any awards, but it's very well done, and it's very, very enjoyable. Now, further on down the cast list, we have James Marsden. James Marsden, a man who I mostly know from X-Men, I'm not gonna lie. He plays Scott Summers' Cyclops. I thought, he was good in those. I just rewatched the first one. I'm probably gonna watch the second one tonight. It's kind of hard to talk about Marsden in X-Men just because of the way that those movies take the character. They sort of cast him aside, I suppose, in favor of Wolverine and Storm, which I understand. Wolverine is the most popular X-Man by far, and Storm is definitely up there. She's an incredible character, a true leader of the X-Men, and so, I'm not necessarily mad about that. Another thing which James Marsden has done more recently, which I've heard very good things about but have not yet had the chance to watch, is Jury Duty. I know that he is top billed on IMDb for this series, although he's not in the poster, so I'm a little curious as to what his actual role is in that. In addition, I think in the cast list, he's listed as James Marsden. James Marsden playing James Marsden. But like I said, I heard that show is really good. I don't think it got renewed for a second season. I thought I heard that, but I'm not 100% sure at all. In any case, it's one that has been recommended to me by many friends, one of whom has given me really great recommendations in the past. She recommended Attack on Titan to me, which longtime listeners of the show will know I'm a huge fan of. And so I'll definitely give this a watch at some point. It's not incredibly high on the list, but it's definitely there. It's been in my queue. I don't know when I'm going to get around to it, but I would like to watch it. Now, as it pertains to this movie, I really liked James Marsden's character. In this, James Marsden plays Miles Knox. This is the son of Henry Knox. And I thought it was very, very, very well done. Again, another character who we sort of don't get to know all that much. We don't get to see too much of his mindset. Again, this, back to what I mentioned earlier, I would have liked to have seen some more of the relationship between Miles and John, between father of son. I think not only would it give us insight into their actual relationship, which is kind of the plot of the whole movie, but it would give us more insight into the two characters as individuals, right? We would understand a little bit more about them, why they really came apart, why there was this this rift between them. Because Marsden says in the movie that the reason that they're estranged is because his father is a contract killer. Which, is a fair reason to sort of cut somebody out of your life. But I feel like there's gotta be more. I feel like there's gotta be more there. There's something in the childhood that we're missing. Michael Keaton's character, John Knox, at one point says, or at multiple times says, I was a terrible dad. How were you a terrible dad? In what way? Were you just, enveloped in your work? Were you just away from home? What happened here? What's going on? How were you a bad dad? These are the things that I would have liked to have seen, which I think would have made the movie much better in every way possible. Again, not to say that it's a bad movie. I think it's an enjoyable movie, but these are definitely things that I would have liked to have seen. Further on down the cast list, we have Suzy Nakamura, who is playing Detective Emily Ikari. Now, this detective I thought was really fun. I don't know if seeing the other side of this, I don't know if seeing this story from the perspective of law enforcement is necessary here. I don't know how much it truly adds to the movie. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe I should go back and give it another watch and see here. But in a lot of cases, it felt like the storyline of the detectives was just there to prove, or rather to I suppose, build a certain level of suspense, to sort of build up that level and that feeling that perhaps Knox is going to fail and Miles is going to end up going away. But I never really felt that throughout the movie. I never really felt like there was any worry, I suppose. It always felt like the detectives were a couple steps behind. And not in a way that is truly fascinating, right? Not in a way where it's like, oh, this is a criminal mastermind who is outsmarting the cops. It just felt more along the lines of the detectives are behind because they have to be for the story. And maybe that's just because we don't get to see really all that much of them. We don't get to see too much of the actual investigation. It's just interspersed here and there. I don't know, but it felt, again, it's another aspect of the movie that I think needed to be expanded upon. It's an aspect of the movie that either needed to be explored or cut, in my opinion. And right now I'm leaning towards cut, just because I would have liked to have seen more of the relationship, again, between the father and son. I would have liked this to be much more of a family story than a crime story. Obviously there's the crime aspect that's all going on in the background, but I would have liked to have seen the family dynamic. And if that means that the sort of mystery detective aspect of this suffers, then that's ultimately, a trade-off that I'm okay with. Suzy Nakamura, I thought she did fairly well in this. Her portrayal of the detective was interesting. I enjoyed her observant nature, right? This is the kind of person who sees more things than other cops. In some cases, it felt like it was underutilized, I guess. Like it was just there and sort of taken for granted. I wish it had been something that if they were going to explore it, I wish it had been explored a little bit more. Maybe we get to see her actually work, turning the gears, as it were, trying to uncover, the perpetrator of this. I thought that would have been interesting. I'm not too familiar with the actress. Not a whole lot of work in the filmography. She was in a couple episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is definitely one that I'm probably not going to watch. I've heard that it's great, but it doesn't strike me as one that I'll enjoy. I'm not a huge fan of those types of shows, but again, I've heard it's great, so if you enjoy it, not to disparage it, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not something that I think I'll probably enjoy. Other than that, Suzy Nakamura gets points in my book because she was in one single episode of How I Met Your Mother, so because of that, she gets bumped up a whole extra couple of points. Again, it's only in one episode. I think she is, who is she? She is Barney's heart doctor. So she's just the heart doctor for the whole gang. After Marshall's dad dies of a heart attack, spoiler alert, I guess, for an episode of a sitcom that came out like probably a decade ago. I think it ended a decade ago, so even more than that. But Marshall's father dies of a heart attack, and so the whole gang goes and gets themselves checked out, and Barney goes and I think, oh geez, what happens here? It's when he's dating Nora, and there's a part where his heart like skips a beat when he sees her. I don't know. It's a fun interaction, definitely a fun show. But like I said, a bit part. But she gets some points. Also in this film, we have Ray McKinnon, who plays Thomas Muncie. This is the partner of John Knox, of Michael Keaton. And again, we're in the spoiler section here. This was a really interesting plot point, I thought. So Muncie is only seen in like the first act of the film, and honestly not very much of it. He's sort of only shown briefly. There's a scene in a diner between Michael Keaton and Ray McKinnon, which is one of the parts of the movie that I felt was a little bit more clunky. It was a little more awkward. But when they're actually going on an assignment, they're supposed to find a guy or whatever, and Michael Keaton goes into the bathroom of this apartment and shoots the two people in there, and then that's when he gets disoriented, I guess. I don't know what the actual term is, but when he loses his lucidity, and so he's standing in the bathroom, and Muncie comes in through the door. Keaton isn't expecting him, and so he wheels around quickly and shoots him a couple times. And then he has to quickly set up the scene. I thought that was really, really fun. Again, this is another thing that I would have liked to have seen explored a little bit more. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the relationship between John Knox and Thomas Muncie. I would have liked to have seen some scenes showing that they're longtime partners, that they're good friends, you know, so it sort of further hits on the emotional impact of Knox having this bout of confusion and accidentally killing his partner. Ultimately, in the movie, it feels almost anticlimactic, you know? But I thought he's an interesting character. Again, something that I would have liked to have seen more. Ray McKinnon is an actor that I'm not very familiar with. His credits include the Deadwood series, which is another one that's been on my list for a long time, Sons of Anarchy, it's on the list, and the Mayans Motorcycle Club, which will be on the list if I decide that I like Sons of Anarchy, which I'm sure I will, because again, this is another show that I've heard is absolutely amazing. I know that my dad really enjoyed it. I know Shade is a huge fan, and so I'll watch it at some point. This is one of those great modern TV shows, at least as I hear. And so it's definitely on the list. I would like to see more of this guy, just to find out if his portrayal, his character in this, if the performance is awkward because the writing is clunky, or just because the guy's not a tremendous actor. That's something that I would definitely like to see. And so maybe I'll watch that sooner rather than later. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Now, also in this film, we also have Joanna Kulig. I don't know. There's no accent over the U, so I would assume maybe it's just Kulig. I don't know where she's from. But Joanna plays this character, Annie, who is a call girl and who is Michael Keaton's regular Thursday date. And it's really, they have an interesting relationship, right? You get the sense that even though she's a call girl, they come over and they have, they're very close, right? This is not just a physical relationship there, right? Like John Knox is looking and searching for companionship. He doesn't want to be lonely anymore. And so he has Annie, and they have a lot of interesting interaction. This is mostly where it comes through that John Knox is a bit of a philosopher, a history buff. He has these books which he lends to Annie. I enjoyed the plot point that in Michael Keaton's will or whatever, he's written in 3 people: his ex-wife, his son, and this call girl, someone who's been with him for, I think it said 2 years. I like that, that sort of plot point. It makes a lot of sense. Somebody who has nobody in his life gives away his things to the only people who, at least at one point, really cared for him. What I didn't necessarily care for is the quick turnaround from Annie at the end, wherein she ultimately betrays John Knox and tells, I don't know, a band of thugs that he's got a bunch of money holed up in the apartment. I didn't necessarily enjoy that, partially because it came out of nowhere, and it came out of nowhere in an unsatisfactory manner, right? It wasn't like the type of thing where it felt like there were hints throughout the movie that this person has a shady past, has these shady connections. It didn't necessarily feel ever like Annie was necessarily casing the joint, which doesn't make sense, right? Because if Annie's been coming to John Knox's house or whatever for like 2 years, surely she would realize that this is a man who's got money. Surely she would realize that this is a man who has a lot of valuable possessions. And so if she were going to case the joint, she would have been doing so earlier. It felt like a swift turnaround. It's the type of thing where I would have liked some brief allusions, some very subtle hints, maybe like a sideways glance or a lingering look or something like that. But it really just felt like it was out of nowhere. And so I thought that was underwhelming. But her character is fairly interesting. The portrayal is good, is well enough. It's decent. Again, another character we don't necessarily get to see a lot of screen another character who doesn't necessarily get a lot of screen time, right? There's only a few scenes every now and then, so it's really sort of tough to comment on the performance and the quality of such. I don't know. This actress, I'm not familiar with. Her credits include like Cold War and The Innocents, both of which perhaps I'll watch. They sound like, or at least Cold War sounds like an interesting film, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, there's not really much to say on her character because she's just frankly not there all that much. Yet another aspect of the film that I wish had been either expanded upon, explored, or just dropped, right? Just drop it. If you're not going to really build up to the betrayal, then I don't think it's necessary. And then finally in the cast list, we have the man, the myth, the legend himself, Al Pacino. That's right, Al Pacino plays Xavier Crane in this movie, who is a longtime ally and friend of John Knox. We get the sense that Xavier is the man who taught Knox the game. He's the man who brought him up and made him into a contract killer. And I think they have a really interesting interaction. They have a really interesting relationship. It's fun to see these two people interact, these two acting legends, whose characters are fairly interesting as well. So when Michael Keaton approaches Al Pacino, he approaches him and says, and he explains to him his health situation. He tells him that he's got dementia or whatever, and he explains his plan, and he says, hey, every once in a while, I need you to call me to make sure that I'm on track, to make sure that I'm still sticking to the plan and I haven't forgotten what I'm doing. And I thought that was a really interesting and logical plot device. And I like the way that it's pulled through or pulled into the show in different ways. At these pivotal moments, Al Pacino calls John Knox when he's lost his position in the world, and he reminds him to go do whatever. And he at one point he comes and picks him up when John Knox is just wandered off in the woods. I think it's really, really enjoyable. And Al Pacino's conclusion is one of the more satisfying conclusions in the film. There's this interaction between Pacino and Keaton where Keaton says, hey, once I'm gone, I need you to take care of my finances. I need you to take care of the money, send it where it needs to go. And Al Pacino goes, what, you trust me? I'm a thief, why would you give me your money? And Keaton goes, he says something along the lines of, you wouldn't screw me over, or something like that. And then it's just dropped, and at the end of the film, we see Al Pacino. He calls in a tip to the police to tell them that Michael Keaton is at the apartment and that there's dead bodies there from the betrayal of Annie. And it's an anonymous tip. And then the next time we see Pacino, he is talking to the man who manages the money, and the money manager, I guess, he asks Pacino, do you want to carve out a section for yourself? And Xavier replies, no, none for me. And it's one of the more, I guess it's one of the wholesome moment of the film, the only wholesome moment of the film. Al Pacino's like, nah, I'm not doing it. No, I can't. I may be a thief, but I'm not stealing from this guy. And I thought it was really, really interesting. Al Pacino, again, like I said, the man, the myth, the legend. He needs no introduction. I don't need to go through his filmography. Again, another man whose filmography is too massive to go over all of the hits he's got and some of the bad ones. Obviously, we've got the Godfather trilogy, two of which are amazing and one of which is okay. Then we've got Scarface, and then there's Devil's Advocate. I mean, he's just a great, phenomenal actor, and I thought he did really, really well here. Now, always in these reviews, we talk about the cinematography. I will say, I don't think necessarily there was anything too amazing here. I don't know if there was anything that really blew my socks off, but it was decent. There were a few shots where I was like, oh, this is fun. There were some frames within frames that I really enjoyed. I didn't necessarily enjoy a lot of the camera movement itself, but again, it's a movie that, while it doesn't break down any barriers, while it's not the most visually beautiful or visually striking film, it's definitely enjoyable to watch. There were, like I said, some interesting scenes, some interesting composition, nothing amazing, but certainly enjoyable. Now, what is interesting about this, though, is that the cinematographer has a kind of stacked filmography, if we're being honest here. He's kind of got some really interesting things to his name. So the cinematography is by Marshall Adams, who did the work for El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie, as well as like 30 episodes of Better Call Saul. 30 episodes? That's quite a bit. I mean, granted, the series ran for, I want to say, I think like 5 years or something like that, so there's quite a few episodes, but still 30, that's gotta be at least half, around half. What I mean, Breaking Bad had like 13 episodes a season. I assume Better Call Saul is fairly similar. That's a lot of episodes. And then he's also got 13 Reasons Why in his filmography, so we've got sort of a lot of weird work here. He was also the director of photography on Rush Hour. It's such a veritable smorgasbord of movies and series here. But again, I nothing to necessarily shout about, and I don't know if that's necessarily the fault of Marshall Adams, or maybe that's the fault of Michael Keaton, or it's shared, or it's nobody's fault really. But again, there's just nothing really amazing here. But honestly, final thoughts, like I said, I mean, this movie, as I've been saying, it's enjoyable. It's a fun watch. It's a slow burn. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it if those are the types of movies you don't enjoy. If you like a fast-paced action movie, or even a fast-paced thriller, or a mystery that keeps you on your toes, this is definitely not the movie to watch. But it does have an interesting story. It is interesting to see it play out, and I definitely had fun watching it. It kept me engaged. So, I think that's enough. I think that's plenty. That's all I'm really asking for, is a movie that's moderately good, that keeps me engaged, with some interesting shots, some fun ideas. And I think this movie does that really well. I think it hits all of those markers. So all in all, I would probably give this movie a 7 out of 10. I think it's enjoyable, probably worth a watch if you got a spare 2 hours. There are also other movies that you could watch if you had a spare 2 hours they would probably be better spent that way. But it's enjoyable. So I don't know, if you want to go ahead and give it a watch, I'll recommend it. It's fun. Like I said in the intro, it is available streaming on Max or on Prime Video if you have the Max channel. So go ahead and give it a watch. Make sure you comment down below what you thought of this movie. Did you enjoy it? Or was it too much of a slow burn? Did you not enjoy the story or the mystery? Let me know all of your thoughts down below. We'll be back here Monday with a brand new news segment, and I will see you guys then.